But the one thing she's not telling you is that we met at a networking event. And what she's also not telling you is that this transition she's making into stand-up comedy came about as a result of somebody at a networking event saying, I'm selling this comedy course, will you come on it? You know, so she's already proved that networking, well, she could do it, and also that it's changing her life, which is kind of significant. But of course, she's also right that it's not always easy. And so I can think of networking events where I've been and I was sort of cringing at the end thinking, you know, either that one where you think, I'll just stay by the back wall and that feels safe and I can look at all of you and I know I'm here, I can tell people I was here, but I haven't actually talked, so I'm getting some nods of recognition there. So we've all had those kind of moments, but I guess the fact that you're all here means that you recognise that networking is important, it's something that we need to do more of, and for our own professional development, we need to be out there and talking to people. And I think there are three main reasons for networking. So one of them is this idea of extending our professional reach. You know, maybe we're accountants, maybe we're florists, maybe we're physicists, whatever it is, there are experts in the field that we want to know. There may be people who have influence. It may be in our organisation, it may be in our profession, it may be in our business sector. But you know, if we can get to meet more of those people, in the long run it's going to be good for us. So extending our professional reach. And then the second thing I think is all about career opportunities. You know, sometimes we are, you know, as Sonia might say, we've been let go from a job, but we want to find a new one. But isn't it better to be networking with the intention that one day we will take another opportunity when it comes along? So the more we network, the more people know about us, the more likely it is they're going to think of us when they need somebody to fill a position. And then, of course, thirdly, it's also about building our own businesses. And I know that last time when Stefan was here talking about negotiating, there were a number of people who were just starting new businesses. And that's an absolutely classic moment when you've really got to get out there and get everybody to know what you're doing. So that's our three key reasons for networking, I think. And it's funny, I was coming on the train and I was remembering listening to a teenager who did a brilliant speech about the benefits of sleep and why teenagers should be allowed to sleep as much as they wanted. But he had a little rhyme at the end, and so I borrowed this partly from him, which is, to power your potential, networking's essential. And I think Najee Hackett would approve of that. So clearly, you know, we are social animals, we like to help each other, so how can we make that work for us in a business point of view? And we have, do we not, a map to help us with our smart networking. So map, three things, the first being M. And that is thinking about all the methods for networking that there are. And I'm sure you know, there are thousands of them. Where do you start? You know, and we know, at least at a minimum, we've got to be online somewhere, haven't we? If somebody's recruiting, if we're going to a meeting with people we haven't met before, there's a very strong chance that they will just drop our names into a search engine and see what comes up. And we want something to come up that we want them to see, so clearly online is important. So let's just take a litmus test, because somebody we were talking to when we came in has already mentioned LinkedIn. So how many of us here are on LinkedIn? So quite a few of you aren't yet, so that's interesting. And of the people, keep your hands up, who are on LinkedIn, how many of you have been onto it in the last week? And of those of us who've been on in the last week, how many of you would count yourself as active? So you're on groups, you're maybe connecting people, you're putting up blog posts, you're doing various, all the hands are dropping down. So there are a few, there are about 4 people with their hands up. So stick them up, hi, be proud you LinkedIners. So these are the people you need to go and talk to afterwards, because they are the people who know how to get the most out of LinkedIn. So we need to be doing that kind of thing. We need to be there. And the question is, when you are on LinkedIn, what do people find? And I was thinking about this the other day, because I was sitting with a friend of mine who's a recruiter, and she was just had a BlackBerry out and she was scrolling through on LinkedIn looking at lists of names, potential people for a job. So there was name and then the professional strapline that you put on. So, you know, Joe Smith, accountant, you know, Mary Saunders, financial controller. You go, oh, not terribly exciting, and not making them stand out from all the many finance people that she was scrolling through. And it made me, when I was first on LinkedIn, I think my strapline was much like that. It said, you know, HR professional trainer, you know, and you think that's really not going to do much for me, is it?
No. Now you've got a better one.
Okay.
I'm going to read it because I was supposed to learn it by heart, but I didn't.
It was so fascinating, she hasn't remembered it.
It's better. It's much better. It says public speaking and personal branding for professional success. I mean, that sounds much better than HR person, right? Much better.
Yeah, and clearly for me, I mean, I've transitioned from a traditional HR role, and I want people to know that those are the specific things that I'm interested in. If I just put trainer, you know, I don't train in finance. I do train in public speaking, I do train in other things associated with that. So that's what I want people to pick up and know about. So there's something about making sure when we are on things like LinkedIn that we're making that professional headline smart. And so when anybody is scrolling through on their BlackBerry, on their smartphone, they're going to see something they'll say, whoa, now that one's worth stopping and you know, clicking through to. So let's make sure that we do that. And of course, the other thing, talking about the wonders of smartphone technology, of course, is that most people, or many people, are now looking at us online on their smartphones. So LinkedIn is fine, it's kind of designed for that up to a point, but LinkedIn is also quite prescriptive in what it allows you to say about yourself or to structure what you're saying. So quite often it's good to maybe think about using some other medium where you can be a bit more creative. And think about how it looks on a smartphone. And there's one person that I met called Francesca, and I really remember her, and what helps me to remember is what I saw on the smartphone after I met her, which was that. So if you look at that image, and imagine that on your screen, what sort of person do you think she might be? What sort of qualities might she have, do you think?
Well, she skis.
She skis, yeah. So what might we think about her from that? Adventurous. She's adventurous, possibly?
Free spirit.
A free spirit, yeah. Any other words that spring to mind? Active, yeah. Linguist, outgoing. So there are a lot of things like that we immediately see. You know, here's this woman, and she's chosen to put this particular picture. And when I think of Francesca now, I just immediately think of the skiing picture. And it then reminds me of a whole load of other things about her, as it happens. But I think she specifically designed that so that when you're using a smartphone, you get all the key things she wants you to see straight away. And that's just something to think about, and that happens to be hosted on About Me, but there are other websites like that, and they're really cheap to use. So the question is, if you're out there networking for whatever reason, why not use something like that? And then you get your formal LinkedIn stuff, and you can be a bit more creative and show a bit more of your personality, perhaps, through something like that. So that's one of the sort of tips, I think, for that idea of the online side of networking. And it shows that you're kind of standing out from the crowd, really, isn't it? So this comes through to the idea of personal branding and just being a bit different. So that's all very well. But what about when we have to stop playing with our smartphones or our laptops and actually meet some real people? Because clear that you don't know, or maybe some that you do. You know, because if you think about it, we all know lots of people. We already are in some sort of network, aren't we? Don't know how I did that or who did that, but anyway. So we're already in networks.
Playing with a smartphone.
Okay, so what it is. Okay, fine. But, you know, Sonia, we were talking about career change earlier on. And so because she's been changing careers, Sonia's had to really use her networking skills. So what I wanted to do was just get her to tell us, to begin with, how she started. What were the first thing you did to get your networking going?
Yeah, as I said, I hate networking. That's a fact of life. And I thought when I was making a career move from a banker to a stand-up, that's not an easy thing to sell. So I thought, I don't know any comedians. I don't know any comedy promoters. But what I do know is my friends and family. And so that was my first network. call. I called them and I said, I'm going to make this crazy change. So if you know of anybody or absolutely anything about this, please call me. And you think that there's not a lot of people there, but there are, because two to 3 months later, I got a call from a bank saying we have a charity fund and we need a comedian. And I didn't even know that person. He was a friend of a colleague of my brother. So once you reach your friends and family, which is the closest network, it will go on and on, I think, exponentially. So
Yeah.
that's really what I did first, Dorothea.
Okay,
Over
well
to you.
that's a good start. Because, yeah, and I mean, those of you who were here for Stefan's lecture last time about negotiation, what was his first tip on negotiation? Can anybody remember?
Ask.
Just ask. And who better to ask than your family and friends who have a vested interest in, hopefully, in you doing well, and who are ready to spread the word and say, oh, do you know what that Sonia's doing now? You know, if nothing else, it gives them some good gossip. But it hit the right ears of the friend, and that's what really matters, isn't it? And if you think about it, if Sonia's told 50 of her friends and family, and they all somehow told 50 of theirs, you're already up to 2,500 people who now know something about what Sonia's up to. You know, and if you have somebody like me who's maybe a bit more sociable than Sonia, and she contacts me and I tell 150 people, and they tell 150 people, then we're already up to 22,500 people. You know, so it doesn't take long, as Sonia says, it is exponential once you start pushing the information out there. But as we said, like Stefan, we have to ask and say, just pass this information on and let me know, you know, if anybody has any contacts or knows anything useful. And so then, Sonia, you had told your friends and family, you got your charity gig to do.
Yes, I did.
But how did you start widening the circle beyond your family and friends?
Well, what happened was that as a comedian, you always need to do gigs, right? So I met this guy that's his nickname, his name is Billy, his nickname is Billy Bad Mood, because he's always in a bad mood. He has a show. And so I said, Billy, forced myself, point for me, I need a spot in your show. And he said, you've got Thursday, 5 minutes, intimate audience. For those who have gone to comedy shows with intimate audience, it's you and the bartender. But I went, and I just said to myself, this guy has a service that I need, and I think I might have a service he needs, and I got to know him. Over 7, 8 months, I got to know this Billy Bad Mood. He's still in a bad mood, but sometimes when I call him and say, listen, can you give me a spot on Saturday nights for new material? And he'll do it, because it's really about just getting to know the person. And also it's about time. You can't do it overnight. So that's really what happened. And little by little, it just exponentially got some contacts. So I'm still working at it, but it's enormous.
Okay, yeah. But you've had lots of gigs at
Yes,
Billy's
and
Club.
At the end, it's about being professional about it. I was there. I did my 5 minutes to the bartender. It's just about following up on those leads or on those people that you do meet, and being a professional about it.
Yeah, and reminding people. So it's not, I mean, the one thing we know, isn't it, about networking, it isn't a one-off activity. You know, you can meet somebody, and that's great. They now know Sonia's a comedian, you know, I'm teaching public speaking amongst other things. But we need to keep reminding them, tell them what we're doing, what have we done this month? Because once it's 8 months ago, who cares, really? So there's something about continuing to inform people and keep in touch, whether you do that through LinkedIn or Facebook or by emailing them or calling them, but you have to keep reminding them and you have to keep showing up at events. So that's another way of doing it. But what then about the moment when you say, okay, the friends and family know, those targeted people that I've widened my circle a little bit, and now I am going to have a go at one of those giant events, one of those wonderful corporate things that we get sometimes invited to, where there'll be a few hundred people, and you're expected to come back with some lists of new contacts and people that maybe you have pressed your business card on, yeah, who are looking really pleased to have it. So how can we make the best of those kinds of events? And this is where we get to the second letter in our map. We get to the A, which stands for attitude.
Yes, because I think that's the hardest thing. Don't you agree that when you're there in the meeting or the seminar, you don't know anybody, and you say, how do I start? What do I do? And that, I think that's the crunch of this talk.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah, and attitude is not just about going in thinking positive thoughts, it is that, but it's also thinking about how does that come across? Because the one thing that is unfortunately true is that everything you've heard about first impressions being formed in seconds when you meet somebody is true. And psychologists have done endless research that establishes the fact that even as you walk into the room, people are forming an impression and thinking, are you the kind of person I want to go and talk to? And so, you know, if I come in looking kind of like that, you know, like the person who is going to stick to the wall, what are you likely to think? Whoopee, I must go and talk to her. No, probably not. You're thinking, okay, I was thinking of going and talking to her, but actually maybe I'll go and talk to this person over here instead. Because there's something about our body language. We just leak out these signals, don't we? It's unconscious, we're not intending to do it, and also people pick up on them. And it's all happening in our unconscious minds, and then suddenly we just think, not so sure. I mean, she looks okay, but maybe I'll go and talk to somebody else. And that's what we want to avoid. So it's all about how do we walk into a room, look as though we're there for a good reason and that people will want to talk to us. And I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that we appear nervous and we appear uninterested, and it shows in our bodies. So we're going to now do a posture exercise. And Sonia is Miss Posture, as you will notice. She did lots of ballet when she was a child. Still does a bit, as you can see. So now you're lucky you're in a tight space, so you're not going to be asked to do ballet. But can I just ask you all to stand up? Just indulge us for a minute and stand up. And luckily, you know, you're going to see us looking silly, and that's it.
You should have had those drinks before.
And now what I want you to do is...
Yeah, do that drink.
Yeah, so now, because what happens when we're nervous is we kind of crunch up. So what I want you to do is make yourself as small as you possibly can. So dig your feet into the floor, bring it. And if your shoulders come really together, it means you're going to have to stick your neck right out. And now I want you to say to me, hello, my name is, I'm really pleased to meet you. Can I hear you say that, please?
Hello.
I don't think your voice is carrying terribly well. Right, let's just shake that off because that really doesn't feel good. Now, of course, we know, don't we? It's when people have an open posture. It's almost like your hands forward, you just look relaxed. So let's just make everybody think, let's get your shoulders, you know, get those shoulders relaxed, make you feel you can breathe well. Imagine you have that string at the top of your head that's just pulling you gently up so that your mother would say, oh, what wonderful posture. Sonia's mother, who made her go to ballet, is saying, Sonia, you have such beautiful posture still. So because then, if you think about it, now when you say, let's hear you say, my name is, I'm pleased to meet you. My name is
Sonia, I'm pleased to meet you.
Sonia.
So we have another comedian in the house. You've got competition.
Talk to you afterwards.
Okay, so just sit down for a moment, because, I mean, I think you can immediately hear the volume went up dramatically. Not only did the volume went up, but your voices sounded so much nicer.
And also you were smiling.
Yeah.
Most of you, I mean, the guy in the back, you already got it with the string there. What's your name, sir? What's your name?
Will.
Will, you got the string, because he was like, everybody was like this, and you went, whoop! So, Will, you've got it covered.
Yeah, and I think this is just something to practice, you know, and it's also thinking about those symbols that you've got. So just imagine for a moment, you're sitting down, okay, so you've been networking, you've been talking to lots of people, you're allowing yourself a little sit down just for a minute or two, because you're beginning to feel a bit tired, maybe your feet are hurting a bit. And you're thinking, right, I've got to get up there and talk to that person on the other side of the room. How do you regenerate your energy? And this is where I think these little symbols work extremely well. So what I've got here is a trampoline. So I thought, I want a bit of bounce. And I want to be able to jump up and see what's happening in this room and then bounce back and just do a little, you know, like this. And of course, as soon as I start thinking bouncy, you know, I'm going to be going more upright, aren't I? Because you can't jump up and down like that if you're kind of... So here I am. It's immediately made me feel more energetic and ready to have that last go before I go home. Okay? So just take a moment to think about your own symbol and think, how does that make you feel? If you focus on it, when I'm at my best, I'm like this. So I'm like the bouncy person on a trampoline. We've got all sorts of other things in the room. We've got dolphins, we've got rivers, we've got open books, we've got a whole host of very different things. They're all going to make you...
We've also got people on deck chairs. But some...
Okay, we've got the laid-back people here too. Well, that's good.
I love it.
But the fact, whatever it is, if that's you at your best, it's a positive feeling for you, isn't it? And it's going to give you that bit of oomph and extra energy to say, right, I'm going to step up again and go and talk to the next person. So just tell us, because you've done the ballet and you're doing the comedy stuff, and that's hard.
Well, yes, it is. I'll just tell you a tip that is not only for comedy, any time that you need to be in front of people. When I started comedy and I had to go on stage, off stage, I would be going like, oh my God, these jokes are not going to work. I mean, they only worked with my grandmother. And she's Spanish, doesn't even know English. So and of course I would go on and then, Mommy, where are you? No, so I have a little bit more experience. And what do I do now? I just focus and I say, I've got something terrific to say. I've got so many stories and they are going to love it. And I do, inside my head, what we call the comedy leap, okay? Inside your head, you go like this, whoa! And I'm going to tell you something fantastic. Most of the comedians you see have that comedy. They might not do the leap, but they have it in their mind. Because who do you want to see? Do you want to see, or do you want the one that comedy leaped? You don't have to do the leap. Inside your head, you've got something to say. And that is, it changes the energy of the room. Do you agree? Yes? And that's what you have to take home. Take home the comedy leap, it works.
Okay, so we've all got to be Michael McIntyre, because he's definitely a leaper.
He does that. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Okay, so maybe not at all the corporate gigs that you might be going to, but that idea of you start with that kind of energetic high, because it's attractive, and people are much more likely to want to talk to you if you're starting like that. And that's, after all, what it is all about. So that's our A. We've got to step onto our metaphorical stage with the right attitude and look like we're ready to talk to you and to share information and to be helpful, not just to be there, but for that very specific networking purpose. So that brings us to our final P, which is all about personality. And clearly, when you look around the room, think about those symbols. You know, they're saying to us, we've got some very different people here. You know, somebody who's at their best like a dolphin is going to be very different to somebody like Sonia, who has got...
The World Cup.
Okay. And how does that translate into what happens when you're the...
It would be sunny and bouncy, but then you don't know what you're going to get. So that was sort of the World Cup behind this, but... Is that a bad thing? No?
But aren't you going to be lifting up the trophy at the end?
You're right. Bouncing the ball and sunny, but at the end you don't know. Maybe something will happen that we're not expecting. A lot of people hear English, so maybe we don't want to a bad image to use. But listen, Spain's also doing really bad. We'll just leave it at that.
But if you think about it and think about what Sonia's doing now, I mean, she didn't make that connection necessarily herself immediately, but she's doing comedy. She has stepped into the unknown, hasn't she? You know, so there's something there about her saying, I'm going to be brave, you know, I want to go for the trophy, I may not get it, but I'm just going to have a go and see what happens. So that's the kind of energy that she's bringing to both her comedy and presumably to some of these other networking events that she's going to. So just something to think about. So those symbols in themselves just indicate the variety of people we've got in this room. And you know, obviously we can think about ourselves in other ways, the more standard, are you an extrovert, are you an introvert type of thing. And clearly, for those of us who are introverts, we might think, well, maybe if I'm going to start a bit more networking, those big events with hundreds of people don't sound so much my cup of tea. But maybe I could do a really good job at updating my LinkedIn profile. Maybe I could get more active on LinkedIn. You know, talk to people that way. It's maybe a step at a time, you know. But it's also true that just because you might be extrovert doesn't necessarily mean you can't put yourself about on the internet too. And certainly, I think those of you who are introverts do not have an excuse for not I say that because I think that's really important. We all have to learn to get out there and talk to people more and do the thing in big groups. And Sonia and I, both introverts on every psychological measure we've ever done. Okay. And when we look back and you think, if my headmistress from my primary school could see me doing some of the things I do on stage now, they would be amazed, wouldn't they? They'd be going, how did that happen? But it's because we realise it's important. There are things we want to do, there are things we want to achieve in our professional lives, and it's not going to happen, as I said earlier, with Sonia sitting at home telling jokes to her cat.
To the mirror, it was to the mirror. But, anyway, but we didn't want to leave what we did, because we're wrapping up a little bit. But
we've got a bit more time.
No, we still have time.
We've got a little bit of time.
Okay,
yes,
well, we didn't want to leave without some kind of action plan, because I've always gone to these networking events and say, yeah, really good, I'm going to do that. And then I leave, and that's, where's the train? I'm late, and then you forget everything. So we thought we'd have some kind of action plan for you guys to take away. You might go to the train and say, oh, what was that? But at least, maybe not. Maybe you will take a step. So
Sonia's other personality trait, which is being very organised, she's a very good project manager. So you're not going to be let off the hook. I'm not going to be let off the hook. So what we'd like you to do is just think for a moment, all those types of networking that you could do. Is it LinkedIn? Is it having other stuff, other websites you might use on the internet for your networking? Is it going to a professional event? Is it going to your company's event? What kinds of things could you do? So what we'd like you to do is just take a couple of minutes to write down 3 networking actions that you could take. And just have a think. So this is about you in your job, in your professional life, thinking what 3 things could I do that would be useful, that would help me in my current job, would help me in the business I want to start, would help me get that first job when I finish my qualifications, because I know there are people with all those things in the room.
the good news is they're already here. So that's number 1.
Okay. So as you think about those 3 things, what I'd like you to do is just say, if you just did one of those, which one would you do? And when would you do it by? So just pick one of your 3. And having got that one thing, and the idea of when you're going to do it by, what we'd like you to do is turn to your neighbour and tell them what it is you're going to do and when you're going to do it by. And when you've shared those, then I want you to turn to either somebody behind you or in front of you and tell them and make that commitment to them as well. So let's, you might have to shuffle around a bit because you're spread out.
Guys, I've been asked to cut it short with 2 high kicks for you guys. I hope my trousers don't break. Okay, are we ready? Yes. Give me a cheer, I don't know if you've just noticed, but this became a networking event, okay? I'm not going to look at faces, but some of you were even flirting. So this is a great success. So the drinks, I don't know what's going to happen there. But this has been a networking event. Just a couple of questions, and everybody just started talking. So I think
absolutely.
At least your number 1 networking event is right here.
Okay, so before we move on then, just to remind you of our map, we're talking about this idea of using different methods of networking, both online, making sure you're looking good on the smartphones, all that stuff, as well as stretching out, reaching out beyond friends and family to that wider network. Really working on the attitude, Sonia. Yes. Walking into that room with that positive... I'm not sure that's quite right. Anyway, we'll see. And then just using your own personality, both to bring your own personality across, because we don't want to pretend to be somebody we're not when we're networking, but also to use the things that suits you and sort of build up and expand your range of networking from there. So that's the map that we want you to use and make the most of. So on that note, before we go into the other room and continue to talk, as we have been just now, does anybody have any questions?
For us.
For us?
So we'll take this approach because it's much more friendly.
Okay.
And any questions now?
No? When you've got no contact, how do you follow up? What's the protocol for following up? The emails or question. Because you often exchange lots of cards, what do you think hold out?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, yeah. I mean, I think it depends, doesn't it, on what kind of event it is. But I mean, if you've talked to somebody, if you've asked for their card, then I think it's always a good idea to try and find something that you can say to them that you'll want to follow up on. Say, is it okay if I email you about X? You know, or maybe you've talked and you thought, I know I've just read a really interesting article that they're going to find interesting. Let me say to them, you know, I'll email it to you. But just, it's trying to find some connection and some point of interest that, because you have to have a reason to email them, don't you? Other than just say, hi, remember me. You know, there's got to be something beyond that. So it's really a question of having enough of a conversation that you get a sense of something that you want to talk to that person about more.
And another thing, because I spent many years doing sales as well, but you've got about 3 days for the next connection or people forget. Because if you think of all the things that we receive, you've got 3 days. And if those 3 days you have not contacted, you might as well just leave it because they will not remember. So be choosy and follow up the...
Yeah, because when you think about how many emails people get nowadays, it's... Yes, that's true.
You've got to come to our next course. But here with us. Get your details tomorrow. No, well, I think one of the questions that was also, they ask us a lot is, what do you do in a room full of strangers? I mean, what, do you just go up and say, hey? That is really difficult.